body. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo.
Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Doobie-doobie-doo. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Roundtable and Friday for the Sabby Show. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. I want to give shout outs to people in the chat. Shout out to Sophia, who just became a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. All right. Shout out to Sing at Night, who has a laughing emoji and a thumbs up. Shout out to G.A. Freckles, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, family, going to be another great show with the Sabby sisters. Aww. Shout out to Hannah G, says Sabby with a smiley face. Shout out to Lawrence Johnson, who's a Sabby member, says pin the tail on the snake. Oh, I wonder who that's in reference to. Oh, man. Shout out to Monarch, who says third party summit, genuine or a bust. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. That's something that we're doing over at RBN. CJ actually planned that. So that should be exciting. That's coming up March 18th through March 20th. A lot of things are going to be discussed. CJ went over that actually just in the stream right before this one. He went over the topics that are going to be discussed. So definitely don't miss that, you guys. That should be really cool. Shout out to Justin Johnson, says doobie-doobie-doo. What's going on, Justin? Shout out to Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member, says happy Wednesday, all friends. Shout out to Silver Surfer, says peace, love, and is that the Star Trek symbol? I think that's the Trekkie symbol. Shout out to David, says Sabster. What's going on? Franny French says belated Sabby birthday. Thank you so much. I had a great birthday yesterday. Shout out to Just In Case, says doobie-doobie-doo. Greetings, RIP George Habush. Hashtag notification squad. What's going on, Notorious? Says fire, love, fire, love. Shout out to Sebastian, says happy belated birthday. Hashtag Pisces gang. Whoop, whoop. Pisces. You want to know something really cool about Pisces? We can be some of the sweetest people. We're very caring. We tend to be creative. But we can also be quite mean if pushed in that way. That's the truth. We can be a little moody. Shout out to Yasmin, says hi, everybody. Greetings, LPA Film, says it was pretty good, the third party stream. I just hope everyone who wants this shows up when it counts. 100% agreed. Shout out to Where Pilgrim, says the third party summit will run between March 18th through the 20th. The stream on it was more about talking about some of the guests and soliciting topics to be discussed and questions. Yep. Shout out to Terry, says hi, everyone. Greetings, Leroy, says peace. Shout out to Sharon, says we so need a third party. All right. Let's go ahead and get into it. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the support. Their names are all listed here. If you want to be a Sabby patron, I have 4 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, and ultimate. And quick shout out to DBRH. I think that's supposed to be Deborah, or short for Deborah, who just became a Sabby patron. Thank you so much, you guys. And their names are scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So, what are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and get into our thumbnail. This is my favorite part of the show, by the way, is the thumbnail. Not even kidding. I'm not hard to please. So here we go. Tonight, we are discussing Joy Reid, Hypocrisy. What is Joy talking about? That's a really good story. I can't wait to get into that. We're also going to discuss Dems seek campaign stars. This is laughable, but they're doing it. And we're going to talk about Ilhan Omar speaks out. So, what is that about as well? I want to go ahead and get started with our first story, which is about Joy Reid. Now, recently, Joy Reid, she was talking about the crisis that's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And there was something that she said in reference to who the American people tend to support and who they tend to ignore. So listen to this. I want to share my screen here. Doobie doobie doo. All right. I don't know if it's sharing this or not. I can't see. Okay, I can see now. All right, so here we go. All right, so Joy Reid says there is a lot of soul searching we need to do in Western media about why some wars and lives seem to matter more than others, and why some refugees get the welcome mat while others get the wall. So, most of you know how I feel about Joy Reid. I think she's ridiculous most of the time. She does have a point about this, but there's something that I feel would have given a little bit more fire to what she was talking about, and I'll discuss that afterwards. So let's go ahead and play the video.
Unfold in Ukraine. As the world watches the devastation unfold in Ukraine, nearly 4,000 miles away, another crisis is deepening that we don't hear much about in the U.S., and that is the war in Yemen. In March of 2015, a Saudi-led coalition backed by the United States intervened militarily in Yemen in a bid to fight Iran-backed Houthi rebels. It has triggered one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world due to widespread hunger, disease, and attacks on civilians. 4 million Yemenis have been forced to flee their homes. Now, what we're seeing in Ukraine is absolutely the worst humanitarian crisis that Europe has seen in decades. But we haven't witnessed the same type of solidarity for the Yemenis as we do for the Ukrainians. We don't see historic sanctions or global campaigns, corporations like Airbnb and Netflix taking a stand. And this is not to say that we shouldn't care this much for Ukraine. Far from it. The point is, we should also care this much for refugees and those facing occupation and war in the Middle East and Asia and Africa, too. The coverage of Ukraine has revealed a pretty radical disparity in how human Ukrainians look and feel to Western media compared to their browner and blacker counterparts, with some reporters using very telling comparisons in their analyses of the war.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
The unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is your.
Now, I want you to think about what he just said. We see children with blonde hair and blue eyes being killed. Why was that important for him to mention? It wasn't. Why did he feel the need to mention that? He felt the need to mention it to paint a picture. Because once he told you that, that is the image that you will picture. And time again, people who look that way tend to get more sympathy than people of color. There was a movie called A Time to Kill. I don't know if everyone has seen this movie or not. If you haven't, you should watch it. There's a speech that Matthew McConaughey gives at the end of the movie in the courtroom. The famous courtroom speech. Towards the end of his speech, he says, and this is in reference to Samuel L. Jackson's daughter. He talks about what happened to her, how she was attacked. And at the end, he says, now I want you to imagine that she's white. Now, that was a movie, but it's very true. And I've seen this time and time again. People tend to have more sympathy for people who are white. A person of color can go through the same experience and the sympathy doesn't seem to be there. Now, some of us have experienced this in the medical profession where Black people will go into the doctor, go to the emergency room, and we're not given that same sympathy card that's given to white patients. It does happen. I'm going to go back into the video.
This isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
Also, that part right there. Notice how he refers to the African countries, the Middle Eastern countries, as uncivilized. I don't know if everybody caught that, but I caught that the first time I saw that clip, actually. They're uncivilized. So again, they are given the impression, this is mainstream media. They are giving people the impression that white is better. That's what they're doing. Now, that is allowed for someone to say on mainstream media. That's okay. Not as many people are calling that out. Some people are, not as many though. This is probably one of the few times you'll see me agree with Joy Reid. Still think there's more she could have done though. And I'm going to get to that in a second. So let's go back in.
Civilized. Okay, let's face it. The world is paying attention because this is happening in Europe. If this was happening anywhere else, would we see the same outpouring of support and compassion? Well, we don't need to ask ourselves if the international response would be the same if Russia unleashed their horror on a country that wasn't white and largely Christian, because Russia has already done it in Syria. This is a teachable moment for us in the media. We aren't afraid to call out our own industry. There is a lot of soul searching that we need to do in Western media about why some wars and lives seem to matter more than others, and why some refugees get the welcome mat while others get the wall.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. I don't know how to get her off of here. Hold on a second. Okay. I see no lies detected. And I know sometimes Joy Reid, she is the one that MSNBC usually has talk about like the racial issues. Sometimes she takes it a bit too far. And by that, I mean, sometimes she'll say that things are racist that are not racist. I'm just going to be honest, going to be real. But this is something that I have noticed with this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. There seems to be this overwhelming support for people that are going through despair in European countries, but we don't seem to have that same empathy for people who are going through despair in countries where there's people of color. Tara Reid mentioned this last night. I've been talking about this as well. Where is this same set of sympathy and empathy for people in Somalia, for people in Yemen, for people in Afghanistan? And I mentioned this before, how the sanctions that the US government has put on people in Afghanistan is causing people to actually starve. Children are literally starving. But yet, Western media doesn't seem to care. I'm not hearing about that on CNN. Same thing with Yemen. Same thing with Somalia. And we have a congresswoman who is from Somalia. And recently, the United States government has attacked Somalia again And this has happened multiple times while she's been in office. She needs to say more. I'm going to get into that story later on as well. But the point that I want to make here is this is how the American people become propagandized by mainstream media. They hear these talking points. It doesn't help that you have shows like SNL doing the same thing. I haven't watched SNL in a long time. There's good reason for that. They're not funny. Used to be, but they're not anymore. The fact that you have the entertainment industry, along with mainstream media, ignoring the people who are suffering because of the actions and the sanctions by the United States government, people in those countries, people of color, the entertainment industry isn't even addressing it. I just saw the other day, Leonardo DiCaprio donated thousands of dollars to people in Ukraine. Ashton Kutcher and, geez, I forgot the girl's name already. His wife, Mila Kunis. Fundraisers to donate money to people in Ukraine. Now, those celebrities have a large platform. They can reach millions of people. And I haven't seen them, and if I'm wrong, let me know. But so far, I haven't seen them try to raise money for people in Afghanistan, in Somalia, in Yemen, in Palestine. Why is that? Why do we only seem to really care when it's European countries that are being affected? Why isn't anybody raising money for Haiti? Let's remember what happened to Haitian migrants when they came to the border. Let's remember, we remember those images? It said, no, you can't come here. But I just heard the Biden administration say that the United States needs to open up their borders to refugees from Ukraine, but not for people from Haiti. Even though the United States government is the reason why people are suffering in Haiti. Now, yes, there's been earthquakes to go along with that, but let's be real here. If it was not for the regime change wars in Haiti from the United States government, Haiti would be better off. And our government has been known to intervene in these countries and destroy these countries, and the people are left to live in the rubble. The people are left to live in the rubble. And obviously, it is hard to survive. And they want to get out of those countries and they want to come here so that they can have a life because we stole their life. And then they're told, no, you can't come here. But when it's someone from a European country, all of a sudden, let them come. And anybody, when you see this, make sure you point this out to people. Point this out to your friends. Point this out to your family members. Because they need to wake up and see just how propagandized we are in this country. Most people don't know what's really going on. I know. I talk to a lot of people. Most of them don't know. They think they do, but they don't. Everybody has jumped on this train. We have to support them. We got to be there for the Ukrainian people. And there's a lot of hate that is being displayed against people who are in Russia, civilians who had nothing to do with this conflict. Now, all of a sudden, we're supposed to hate them. And at the center of it all is the United States government. And what we have done and what mainstream media has done is that they have convinced the American people that every time there is a conflict and the United States government is involved, we are in the right. We are never the bad guy. You ever notice that? We never do anything, right? It's always the other country's fault. And what I'm here to do is to wake people up and get them to realize that the reason why a lot of these countries are in this despair is because of the United States government. Most people don't know that. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Quaker Anarchist says Gravel Institute did a similar devastation story about Afghanistan. It's all so awful. Absolutely, Quaker. It's really sad. I can't even show you the pictures. Like I said, it's hard to see. Where Pilgrim says, why doesn't Joy Reid use her platform to highlight issues like Yemen and Somalia then on a regular basis? Bingo. I was going to get to that in just a second. Shout out to Troy for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Also, shout out to Troy for the super chat and for the Palestinians, 100%. And thank you for this super chat as well. Palestine, PS jailed, PS bombed. Sebastian says, I'm Haitian American. My parents are from Haiti, and Haitian workers are on strike demanding an increase to a minimum wage that haven't been increased due to the U.S. State Department. You guys hear that? Because of us. We want these countries to like suffer and struggle, and then to tell the people you have to stay there, you can't come here. Thank you for the super chat as well, Troy. U.S. allies, Saudi Arabia, killing Yemeni people. Oh, I think that's okay, I see. Killing Yemeni people, Israeli murdering Palestinians, Ukrainians murdering ethnic Russians. Liberia got no help too. Well said. Thanks so much for the super chat, Colin. Both Trump and Biden are the same. They both preferred having white refugees come to the U.S. versus black and brown people. 100%. Now, there were a lot of people that told me that Joe Biden was the lesser of two evils. I told them Joe Biden's just like Trump. It's just that Trump was overt, Biden is covert. Now you see. Now you see. In some ways, I think Joe Biden is worse than Trump. Honestly. To the point that Where Pilgrim made. That is an important point to note. Exactly. Why haven't you been mentioning this all the time, Joy? Why aren't you talking about this on a regular basis to get more people's attention? You're only allowed to talk about it when the network tells you you're allowed to talk about it. And even then, you can only show so much. Now, here's what Joy should have shown to go along to back up her statement, but she did not. Let me go ahead and share this. Boop-a-doop. How African students in Ukraine are leading their own rescue efforts. Now, this story is not getting enough attention because this is showing you the discrimination that Africans are dealing with in the Ukraine, which some of us have been trying to talk about, and people are like, no, that's not legit. It's not really happening that bad. I'm going to let you hear the story yourself so that you can see it is happening that bad. So let me get to the video here and then I'll go to the article. I don't know. There's a fruit fly in here and it's kind of bothering me. Okay, sorry.
Mostly they would consider white people first, Indian people, Arabic people, before black people. As long as you're black, no one likes you. I remember they punched a certain black guy, a policeman in Ukraine, punched a certain black guy for nothing. He was shocked for nothing. Yes, so like I said earlier on, they consider white people before considering black people. Yes.
What was that? Police brutality? You don't say. Doesn't that sound familiar? We have that same issue here in the United States. I'll go back into the video.
After that, we went to the train station, and they will not let us in. And when they did let us in, they were like, "You have to give us money because this is not for free for you because you're foreign. This is not free for you. You have to pay for it." Maybe it's a war maybe people start feeling stressed. They want their people to get first. Of course, everyone wants their people to be safe. So they had to express that in a way. So I understand that, but at the same time, you should at least say it in a nice way.
In Ukraine, there is some kind of these bad things. There are so many people there, and the police don't let. They do like kind of racism against foreigners. They let Ukrainian people cross first, and then they let us cross. But I don't speak in general. There is some few cases that do that.
Okay. Let's go through the article. So, again, how African students in Ukraine are leading their own rescue efforts. So let's go down here. Tolulop Osho, 31, reached the Polish border the day after Russia invaded Ukraine. He was close to safety from the war-torn land, but he decided to turn around. I have friends. If by leaving my valuables, I can save more lives, then I'm doing it. Life is more important. Osho, who's from Nigeria, returned to Ternopil in western Ukraine, where he's remained in a safe zone for the past week. He's helped shelter people in underground bunkers, driven them to borders, and provided money through a fundraiser. In all, he said he and a friend have aided some 200 people. You guys see, they are having to save themselves. So the African students in Ukraine are not receiving the help from the Ukrainian government, from the Ukrainian people. They have to save themselves and lead each other to safety. That's what's happening. Let's go back in. I navigate people who don't know how to get out of the war zone, then to the border. I even buy them tickets and pay for transportation. Organizations like Lviv Center for Urban History, Fight for Right, Baktok SOS, and Urgent Action Fund for Women's Human Rights are providing everything from food and transportation to shelter for those fleeing the conflict. And Osho is one of several Africans helping in rescue efforts, often sharing information online using the hashtag African in Ukraine and Black in Ukraine. By the way, you can follow Black in Ukraine on Twitter. Quaker Anarchist was telling me about this the other day. I highly recommend that you follow them so you can see what's going on as well. Along with Osho, a trio of women, Corinne Sky, Takunbo Koke, and Patricia Daly, are among those who have stepped up to help Africans stranded in the country or desperately trying to flee. The women formed Black Women for Black Lives and provided Africans and Caribbeans in the same area with information on the safest routes through areas where they might face discrimination while trying to flee. So this is another thing that they have to deal with. They can be discriminated against while they're trying to leave the country. So they're helping themselves. And the message that it sends from the Ukrainian government is that basically they don't care if the African students are stuck there in the country and they're killed. They don't care. There is a lack of empathy and sympathy for Black lives. Let's just be real. So they don't care if they die or not. They're not going to try to help them. Let's go back into the article. It goes on to say, Ukraine has become a popular choice for African students who now account for nearly a quarter of the more than 76,000 foreign students in Ukraine. Now, that's according to the BBC, which cited government data for its report. While the official count of African and Black people in Ukraine has not been updated in 20 years, Reuters reported that there are more than 16,000 African students in the country, citing figures from the Education Ministry. So there's a good amount of them there. Ukraine is also home to about 20,000 Indian students who have also reported discrimination and hostility and trying to escape since the invasion, according to the BBC, which referred to government data. Russia invaded Ukraine more than a week ago by land, air, and sea, following weeks of tension, sending thousands to various borders to evacuate the country. African citizens living in Ukraine have reported incidents of racist discrimination and abuse at the border, which can include beatings. You guys hear this? Being denied entry to trains or being left stranded in border towns. There is a gap in the access Black people and brown people are getting. There was no one offering their homes to Black people, no one offering to pick up the Black individuals. There was a tremendous amount of people offering help and support, but I feel like it was limited to Ukrainian nationals alone. And we know what that means. It's excluding a group of people. There was a need to support Black people because they weren't getting the support or access. There was a gap and we bridged it. So, as I mentioned, long story short, they're helping themselves. And this is something that would have been good for Joy Reid to add to her segment. Because like I said, a lot of people are not talking about this. And the reason why they're not talking about it is because they have already convinced the American people that Russia is the bad guy. So they don't want you to hear negative things about Ukraine, because then you might think to yourself, oh, well, maybe Ukraine is bad too. And as I've told you guys before, there's no good guy in this story. Russia, Ukraine, US, all of them are bad. But that's not the narrative that they want you to hear. They want you to decide with the Ukrainian people because they want you to believe that the United States government is doing the right thing. And in my opinion, this is another excuse for the United States government to brag about the military budget. This is another reason for them to point to the $768 billion that they gave to the Pentagon, to point to that money and say, see, we told you we had to give more money to the military industrial complex. Otherwise, how would we be able to help resolve this issue with Russia and Ukraine? That's how I see this. Just another excuse. Hit that like button, guys. This fruit fly is going to drive me crazy. Get out of here. There's nothing sweet in here. Nothing. Okay. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. We scroll down. She's Black said the people that the US and NATO put in leadership was/is Nazis. We need to keep talking about this. Yes. And Amazon was trying to sell their attire. They took it down because people complained. But Amazon was trying to sell Nazi attire. Keep that in mind. Trying to make money off of this. Go away. Sorry. Thanks so much for the super chat, The Traveler. How is Biden covert? He wrote legislation for Orange Man and Dem administrations to abuse. That's a good point. That's a good point. Troy, thanks so much for the super chat. Correction, Liberia is USA's second oldest ally in Africa. The oldest is Morocco. Saying at night said, oh, it's legit. Poland wouldn't even let them in. Yep. Thanks so much for the super chat, The Traveler. I saw that Ukrainians are trying to also recruit Africans. And at the Polish border, the police are beating up the African students trying to leave Ukraine or just sending them back to Ukraine. Absolutely. They don't even want to let them escape. They don't care about them. They don't. Now they'll let them to come into their country, to go to school. But that doesn't mean they really want them to be there. That doesn't mean they really consider them to be a citizen there. It's just a reality. People are trying to make a profit. Yes, good point, Lawrence Johnson. It's like a tiny CIA drone. Yeah, that little fruit fly, man. I don't know what to do. So this is a big problem, and I wish more people would talk about it, because you need to see both sides and you need to really understand that there is no good guy in this situation. And it's embarrassing to watch mainstream media and see them not even mention this. People not talking about this in the way that they should. Okay, Eric, I'll get to the Rockfin comments. I actually don't know where they are. I don't see them on the stream. I'm a little bit confused, but I'll come back. Thanks so much for the super chat, John McKinney. Dems are learning the wrong lessons from 2020. The only reason Biden beat Trump was because of the pandemic. If the pandemic hadn't happened, Biden would have lost. And that's something I've said before too. I agree. So that's spot on. Hash Rebel says America just wants to walk into Russia. That's the problem. You go. LPL Film says no good guys, including America. And meanwhile, gas prices continue to soar. Delthea Simmons said Biden didn't beat Trump. Trump lost. There's a difference. Oh, that's a good point, Delthea. That is a good point. Shout out to Delthea. She's a Sabby member. So Joy Reid is taking some slack on Twitter because of this. But when it comes to that issue, she's right about that. I just wish she would have shown like more evidence of what's happening to Black people in Ukraine. I wish she would have shown that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the second story. Now, this one is about, where am I here? Let me see. Sorry, I got too many things. All right. This story, Democrats hunt for the right campaign stars. Yes, they are actually trying this. Let me share my screen. Now, this was reported from The Hill. This is really interesting. So here we go. Democrats hunt for the right campaign stars. Get ready to laugh, guys, because when I read this article, I was just laughing like crazy. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So you can see here they have Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. Okay. Oh, God. Listen to this. Democrats want their brightest stars to hit the campaign trail ahead of November. The only problem, it's an open question who they are. Democrats hold the White House, but President Biden less than stellar approval ratings, even with a possible bump from the State of the Union last week, might not have candidates welcoming him on the campaign trail. You don't say. Progressive fixtures such as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren can draw a bigger crowd than Biden anyway, based on the 2020 Democratic primary cycle. But it's far from clear if their messages will play well in swing districts that will determine the next House majority. In the race for the Senate, Democratic candidates will have to decide whether they are better off standing with Sanders and Warren or Biden and Vice President Harris. So let's talk about this for a second and I'll go back in. The fact that they're even considering Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to jump on this campaign trail and try to get voters to come out and vote for Dems is laughable. I want us to go back to 2020 and I want us to remember how things went for Joe Biden. You're sending them to states where Joe Biden's like favorability rating has decreased. And it wasn't that great to begin with because like someone mentioned earlier, a lot of this was just people just wanted Trump out. It's not that they were so much crazy about Joe Biden. You have Kamala Harris who couldn't get a single delegate when she was running for president. You think it's a good idea to send her on the campaign trail? Really? There is a likability problem here. Kamala Harris does not have what Simon from American Idol used to say, the likability factor. She's just not likable. Maybe it's the way that she speaks. Maybe it's her demeanor. Maybe it's that cringe laugh that she has, but she's not likable. How do you not get a single delegate? How are you not even polling high in your own state? So sending Kamala, I think, is a bad idea. Let's also remember Every interview that I've seen Kamala Harris have since she became vice president has been terrible. She doesn't know how to answer tough questions. She gets frizzled, gets a little frazzy. That's someone that you want to send out on the campaign trail. Then you have Joe Biden. Said this before, Joe Biden doesn't know where he is half the time. You want to send him out on the campaign trail right now with these high ass gas prices? A lot of people are not too happy with Joe. A lot of people are not happy with Joe with these gas prices. Even people that voted for him have told me they are not happy. I think that's a stupid idea. Colin, thanks so much for the super chat. But we were told that Bernie didn't draw big crowds. Yes, we were told that. Oh, my hair's a little frizzy. What's happening? Oh, no. Oh, no. We were told that. That wasn't true. I went to Bernie's rally here in Boston. There were over 10,000 people there. Now, you tell me how Joe Biden won this state. Thanks for the super chat, The Traveler. Kamala just walks around the White House looking for her delegates all day, every day. Every day she's walking. Every day you see her out there walking around. That is so true. So the fact that they would even consider those two is ridiculous. Now let's go on to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. What's the problem that we have here? Got to go back to that likability factor. And when it comes to Elizabeth Warren, she is not likable. This was a problem that she had when she ran for president. A lot of people may not know this, but even though she's my state senator, Massachusetts, she doesn't have a likability factor here either. She is not well liked here. She wins because she runs against people that are just far worse. When she ran against Dio in this last election, he was a Trump supporter. So obviously, she was going to win in Massachusetts again. When she ran against Scott Brown, that was actually a close race. And I think what put her over the edge was the younger people. A lot of younger people came out because she was talking about canceling student loans. Even back then, she was talking about that. Not likable. Then you got Bernie Sanders. Now let's remember, during the Democratic primary debates, Elizabeth Warren accused Bernie Sanders of being sexist. She said he told her in a private conversation that a woman could never be president. Now, I think most of us know Liz was lying. Let's be real. So you're going to send those two out on the campaign trail? Explain that to people. Because if Elizabeth Warren thinks that Bernie Sanders is so sexist, why would she go on the campaign trail with him? Somebody, anybody, somebody. That lets people know it's all a show. It's just a performance. And I think more American people are starting to wake up. So let's go back into the article. All right. All right. So going back in. Biden won't play well in some of these places. And I can say the same for Harris. Now, this is coming from an advisor. They've both been disappointing to some Democrats. See what I was telling you? Democrats believe the Senate map looks more promising than the House, which many think is almost certain to be lost given historic midterm trends and the current tiny majority. That's interesting. The race for upper chamber is slightly more favorable. Candidates are trying to win or retain seats in number of states Biden narrowly won in the 2000 presidential election, including, oh, that's a typo. Oh, no, that is a typo. That should say the 2020 presidential election. Come on, The Hill. Come on, guys. You've been doing this a lot longer than me. Come on, typo. Typo. All right, let me go back in. Now, that includes Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, and Nevada. But there's a debate how much move to the middle or the center for candidates that will influence the surrogate selection process. Some moderate Democrats say that the demand for progressive in core urban areas where they have had proven success doesn't translate to swing areas with higher populations of independent and Republican voters. Let's talk about that for just a second. Let's talk about the independent voters. Independent voters can go either way. They can vote for the Republican or they can vote for the Democrat. So the fact that they're saying that places where there is a higher number of independents, that those types, the progressive types of candidates, wouldn't be a good idea to send like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren to those places. I disagree with that. A lot of times people who are independents haven't even made their mind up yet which way they want to go. Your job as a politician is to convince them. Sounds like to me, they don't even want to try. They're already writing these places off. I think that's a bad idea. I think you should campaign everywhere. I don't think you should just campaign in places where you know, hey, I have that group there that's going to put me in. I don't think that's a good idea. And that's just me. And Bernie Sanders knew that as well. That's why he went all across the country. He didn't just go to the states that were early primary states. Thank you so much for the super chat, John McKinney. Jon Stewart, Louis Black, Jesse Ventura, and maybe Howard Stern are the only celebrities I want running for president. That's literally it. Oh, I like the Metallica logo. Hey, John, Metallica's coming here to Boston for Boston Calling. Boop, boop. I announced it on Twitter. That'll be an epic show. Epic show. Thank you for the super chat, Theron Gilliland. No disrespect, but we need to stop worrying and talking about the train wreck that's the Democratic Party and start working with actual leftist parties. Concentrate on direct action and mutual aid too. That's a good point. That's a good point. And the Tory said Bernie been on his knees for Joe Biden. That just tells me that he wasn't going to do shit. Even if he would have won, love the message, don't love him. And that's a good point to bring up, Notori. Because the way that Bernie is behaving now, that makes me wonder if he would have won, hypothetically, if he would have won, would he actually have fought for these progressive policies like he says? Would he have done them by executive order, or would he have been told not to and he would have gone along with the Democratic Party and what they wanted for the party? Just something to think about. I mean, we'll never know for sure because he didn't win. But watching him fold is interesting. And it's interesting to me, they still lump Elizabeth Warren in with progressives because Elizabeth Warren doesn't agree with Medicare for all. That was something she actually flipped on during the campaign trail. In the beginning, she was for Medicare for all. Even during the debate, she said, I agree with Bernie. Towards the end of the debates, she changed her mind. So I don't know. I don't even know if I consider her progressive anymore. Just being honest. All right, I'll go back in. There's one more point that I want to point out in the article. Let me scroll down. Okay, so I'd be surprised if somebody in North Carolina or Pennsylvania or Florida or Wisconsin in the general election, if they brought in any of the really leftist people. This is coming from James Carville. He's really cringe. You'll see him on CNN and MSNBC a lot. He's ridiculous. Like, he was one of the Democrats that heavily spoke out against Bernie Sanders. He said, I don't think anybody's asking them. They ride by themselves on the school bus. No one wants to be on it with them. Let's talk about that for just a second, because I want to speak to North Carolina. Now, I can't speak for Pennsylvania, Florida, and Wisconsin. I have not lived there, but I have lived in North Carolina. And I want you to go back and look at that election map for North Carolina during the primaries. Bernie Sanders won the mountain region of North Carolina. That's Asheville, North Carolina, Boone, North Carolina. That is more of an artsy, hip kind of area. A lot of artists live up there. I've been up there a couple of times. It's a little bit different. And I've noticed some similarities in reference to North Carolina and Massachusetts when it comes to politics and the urban and the rural areas. These two states have more in common than people would think. Now, I've lived in both. In North Carolina, you have the cities, the mountains, and you have the beach town communities. Massachusetts, same thing. Democrats typically win the urban areas, such as Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, the Triangle, Charlotte. Charlotte's iffy sometimes, but Charlotte, they tend to win those areas and the mountains. Other parts of the state, especially the rural areas, tend to be red. It's like that here in Massachusetts too. Dems usually take the Boston area, like the coast, Worcester, which is in the center of Massachusetts, second largest city in New England, and the mountains, the Berkshires. Bernie did well in the mountain areas in both states. I'd also say he did well in Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville as well, but Joe Biden did beat him with those. And Elizabeth Warren, I think, really hurt him with the Cambridge area because she was a Harvard professor. So there's that. But what I'm saying is that is not to say that people that live in those areas in North Carolina cannot be convinced to vote for a progressive. And the reason why I say that is because for people, you talk to people who canvassed for Bernie Sanders down south, they were flipping like Republican voters, maybe not Republican, conservative voters. Nick was one of those people. You go out to some of those rural towns and you start talking about healthcare and you start talking about having paid family leave. See, you have to get people on the issues, not so much the personality. You'd be surprised how many people can flip. So the fact that, again, the way they're talking in that article, they're already they're already willing to just write those places off. They don't even want to send them there. I think that's a mistake. That's just me. You have to talk to people that you don't agree with. Just keeping it real. Just keeping it real. LPA Film said, yes, Notori and Sabby, exactly. He would not have fought. He would have tiptoed around issues for the sake of not upsetting his good friends in the party. Well said. Well said. Now, the problem that they'll often run into, and this is something I've noticed a lot up here, and actually someone just brought this up in the chat, Sebastian. To me, Warren represents the liberal intellectual elitism. Yes. So those areas that tend to vote that way tend to be highly educated areas. You have a lot of academic elites. It's like that here in Boston. It's like that in North Carolina, in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, like those areas, it is like that. You have a lot of academic elite people that live in those communities. So my suggestion is that you need to reach the people in the rural areas. And that was something that Trump did really well. You need to go out and reach the people that know what it's like not to have health care to convince them to vote for the person who's going to offer them health care. You need to talk to the people that don't have paid family leave. You need to talk to the people that don't get paid sick time at their job because the place they're working at, there are no paid sick days. You need to reach those people. That being said, I really do think Dems are going to lose this year. It's been horrible. And honestly, if they lose, I kind of feel like this is what they get because they ignored the needs and the wants of people in this country. Most people approved of universal health care. The exit polls show you that. And yet we were told to vote for the moderate Democrat who didn't want to give us any of those options, who told us flat out he would veto Medicare for all if it came across his desk. So if Dems lose this year, the joke's on them. Now, what can we do going forward? Now, there's a third-party summit that's coming up for RBN, March 18th through the 20th. We need to start pushing these third-party candidates. For those of you who still want to do electoral politics, you need to start voting third-party or independent. Imagine what could have happened if everyone had voted for Jill Stein instead of voting for Hillary Clinton. And before people say, well, she's not on the ballot in every state, she was in the ballot in 48 states. 48 states. But again, Americans are heavily propagandized. So there's that. I'm going to go back in for one more piece of this article, and then I'm going to move on to the next story. All right, so going down here, this part's pretty funny. Harris has some of the same polarization. One can target the base in a way that might have less backlash. Biden and Harris have been going to other swing states, including places former President Trump won last elections, such as Ohio and North Carolina. But they have not done so as surrogates, and their trips at times have appeared to be intended to help build towards Biden's own race in 2024. Harris is also seen as Biden's likely successor if he chooses not to run for re-election. That's hilarious. Like, people are not going to, people are really not going to go for that one. The challenge is the president doesn't have a defined base. He has a coalition of suburbanites, some independents, and maybe some older Black supporters. But there isn't a place where Joe Biden is dominant. Let's say that again, and I'm going to come out. This is heavily important. The challenge is the president doesn't have a defined base. He has a coalition of suburbanites, some independents, and maybe some older Black voters. But there isn't a place where Joe Biden is dominant, and there isn't. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the problem. Let's go. She's Black says, in other words, Biden ain't shit. That's scary. That's scary. But see, this is what happens when people vote for you just because they want the other person out and not so much because they like you and your policies. This is what happens. Let's move on to my final story. Now, this one is about Ilhan Omar. So she was on Democracy Now! Recently. She had some things to say about Ukraine and Russia, and I want you to hear her statements about this. So let me make sure I go back in here. Okay. Congress member Ilhan Omar says the U.S. shouldn't go to Saudi Arabia for more oil if it stops buying energy from Russia, noting that both countries are waging wars on their neighbors. Our democracy on oil means we depend on tyrants. Now that's coming from Ilhan Omar. I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to play this video for you. So listen to what she says. Uh-oh, the sound doesn't play. Did I put up the sound? That's okay. I'll go to that link.
A powerful, hard to see a principle at play here. If our issue is that we don't want to buy oil from a powerful country that is conducting a devastating war on its weaker neighbor, I just don't see Saudi Arabia hardly being a principled solution. We know that MPS is obviously going to try to take advantage of this opportunity to once again whitewash his reputation and present himself as a reformer, and we shouldn't fall for that. The truth is our dependency on oil means that we depend on tyrants, and that has always been true. So if we are obviously serious about what we need to do in regards to the Ukraine context, we should hard to see a principle at play here. If our issue is that we don't want to buy oil from a powerful country that is conducting a devastating war on its weaker neighbor, I just don't see Saudi Arabia hardly being a principled solution. We know that MPS is obviously going to try to take advantage of this opportunity to once again whitewash his reputation and present himself as a reformer, and we shouldn't fall for that. The truth is, our dependency on oil means that we depend on tyrants, and that has always been true. So if we are obviously serious about what we need to do in regards to the Ukraine context, we should be supporting and defending democracy and human rights, and we should certainly move away. Then we should certainly move away from our dependency on fossil fuels and not be cozying up once again to another tyrant. Hard to see a principle at play here if our issue is that.
Okay. We can come out of that, Eric. Before I respond, I'll take those comments on Rockfin because I think some of them are directed towards Ilhan Omar. Boy, that's laughable. That is a laugh if I've ever heard one. Javi says, I just spent a solid 15 minutes reading Ilhan Omar's activity on Twitter. I went back for days. I give her credit for bringing up Yemen multiple times. She mentioned being a refugee a few times. Still crickets about Somalia being bombed. She can bring up being a refugee, but not mention that we are bombing the country that made her one. There's multiple people running against her. Royce White is well known. Don Samuels is a former council member and is pro-cop. Many want more police after the carjacking and robberies uptick. Then there's Shukri Abdirahman. Omar is in trouble with the Somali base. And when it comes to identity politics, she has everything. She's against Omar's foreign policy and views on immigration. I see the suburbs loving her. And then there was a tip from Roger Meadows too. I'll go ahead and take that. So thanks so much for the tip, Roger Meadows. Can't read it, Eric. Okay, thank you. That article from The Hill wouldn't exist if we abolished all political parties. I invite all your viewers to join the party of no party. Us registered independents to join independentvoting.org. They are an org that figures out how to increase power of us in primaries. Their main instruments are RCV and open primaries. Monday, I was on a Zoom with them and they had Smirkonish, who went from R to I, went from Republican to independent. Interesting. Not going to go into how the man had a blind side when it comes to class, wealth, and income, but there was a bunch of seniors on the call. And as I'm seeing in these spaces, just like in my New York Progressive Action Network Zoom with Chuck, youth energy needs to be in these spaces. I shouldn't be youngest with the energy at 51. I should be oldest, but I will introduce to independent voting org, run ballot initiatives in 24 states to kill the parties. Thanks so much for the tip, Troy. Caleb Maupin always says, get out of the movement and into the people. I think Mao Tung said something like, we have to go to the lowest of the low, economically and forgotten. Well said. Well said. So here's the problem with Ilhan Omar's statement. She can say all of that on Democracy Now! She can tweet it. She can write a strong letter, a strongly worded letter. But when it comes to voting, her votes say differently. This is the problem. I haven't heard her say much about Somalia, and it's her country. She should be speaking about this nonstop. Nonstop. Not one little tweet. How can you abandon the people in your country? Now they have someone who's from Somalia, who's in Congress, who you would think will want to represent them. but it doesn't seem to be there. I've seen her on Democracy Now! Multiple times, and she always seems to say something, kind of somewhat progressive when she goes on to these shows. But then when it's time for her to vote, she never votes that way. That's the problem. So to me, it's just performative. And this is why people wonder why I criticize the squad the way that I do, because your tweets and your little speeches on these little interviews don't seem to transfer into your votes. I'm going to go to some of the comments really quick. Thanks so much for the super chat, John McKinney. The rehabilitation of George W. Bush makes me sick. He was the worst president ever, and he should have been impeached. Thanks so much for the super chat, Delthea Simmons, a socialist gun owner who understands both Marx and the Gospel of Mark, could prove very interesting in North Carolina. I could see that. Thank you for the super chat, The Traveler. Did Omar forget that Obama's administration handpicked the Ukraine's president to replace Yanukovych? Thanks for the super chat, John. Did you see the Jordan Peterson versus Michael Eric Dyson debate? I don't like Peterson, but Michael Eric Dyson came across as an establishment Democrat and has an over-reliance on identity politics. Yes, he does. I've seen him multiple times on different platforms, and yes, he's a solid Democrat. Just keeping it real. Thank you so much for the super chat, LPA Film. Facts at reaching the rural people. This is such a great opportunity for a third party to snatch fed up Black voters, Gen Z voters, rural voters, and people who have checked out of the two-party system. 100%. You have to speak to people in the rural communities. You can't just talk to the coastal elite. Imagine that. So that's the problem that I have with Ilhan Omar's she all talk and no action. All talk and no action. When it came to, let's see something really quick. I had this pulled up. Because if I remember correctly, how did she vote on? Okay. Yeah. We're going to talk about force the vote for just a second. Because she just gave that grand speech on Democracy Now! And yet she still chose to vote for Nancy Pelosi as speaker. These two things don't go hand in hand. If you really believe what you said, Ilhan, why would you vote for Nancy Pelosi again? If you are continuing to vote in a way to keep people in positions that will constantly make sure that we don't end these conflicts, that we don't stop intervention, imperialism, war. If you still vote for those people, or you vote a certain way on those types of legislation, you're a part of the problem. So your speech that you gave on Democracy Now! Doesn't really mean anything. Actions are louder. It means more. But Ilhan Omar is busy trying to cozy up to Nancy Pelosi. trying to get her approval. And if you're trying to get her approval, and you can see it, there's photos of them multiple times of her trying to get Nancy Pelosi's approval. And if you're trying to get her approval, all those things that you just mentioned in that video will never happen. This is done on purpose. There's really no effort to actually change anything. But the idea is to convince us that these people that we put in might change something. And as long as you can convince people of that, that's good enough for them. I'm gonna go to some of the comments in the chat, and I got to tell you about what's happening on Friday. That should be pretty cool. That should be pretty cool. Bill Bradley said, indeed, Rebel, the U.S. is a highly propagandized nation. I agree. I agree. We have a lot of problems, especially when it comes to the media. We have a lot of problems. And I'm not perfect, but I don't claim to be mainstream media either. And a lot of them, some of these journalists, they've been doing this a lot longer than me. And they still lie to you. Joe OWS said the politicians in Washington, for all intents and purposes, are actually corporate lobbyists. Every one of their constituents live in a 2 square mile area called Wall Street. We must visit them soon. U.S. Atlantic Creole African American freedmen say, please don't ever vote for Biden again, ever. I don't know, Hash Rebel. Did you send me something? Did you send me something? I don't know. I don't see. I don't know. I don't know. Miguel said Sabby Sabs is 10,000 times more credible than mainstream media. Oh, Miguel, that's sweet. I'm not perfect, but I try to show you what they won't. So that being said, guys, speaking of someone trying to show you what mainstream media won't, Cynthia McKinney is coming back here on Friday. Friday night, don't miss that stream. That's going to be fire. I'm going to start at 8 o'clock. I'm going to start off with a call-in segment, so you'll be able to call into the show just like people did last Friday. And then Cynthia McKinney will be on here at 9. So I'll edit the call-in stream, and then Cynthia will be here. And this should be pretty good. I definitely want to hear her opinions about Ukraine and Russia, but I also want to hear her opinions about third-party options as well, as someone who also ran on a third-party ticket. It should be awesome. It should be awesome. So I'm excited. She was here before and I had so many questions for her. And I was like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to get to ask all these questions, because I just have so many, but this time, like now I get to ask like those other questions that I had too. So that's going to be good. It's going to be lit. I don't know. Cynthia McKinney is awesome. If you don't know about her, definitely do your research on her. She's really cool. She tells it like it is. She doesn't play around. She'll be awesome. I'm not going to put that up on the screen. Hash Rebel, go away. Go away. Thought I saw something else here. Yeah, gamer. Woo woo. Yeah, she's awesome, man. And I am also, and I know I mentioned this, I haven't made the call yet because I get busy and then I forget to contact people. But I'm also trying to get Jesse Ventura to come on as well, so I can talk to him about how he did it. Like, how did he win? Even if it's on the local level, still, we need to know. And what he thinks about the future of electoral politics. I'll take those comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thanks so much for the tip, Troy. Caleb Maupin always says, oh, I said that already. Sorry. I think I have to scroll down. Thanks so much, Roger, for the tip. If Joe wants to help Dems do executive order for M for All and have Treasury Secretary mint a coin, like Kaboob said, to pay for it. Cancel student loan debt, executive order to do marching rights on life-saving drugs, and have, after executive order for Medicare for All, allow Medicare negotiate for lower drug prices. Executive order take weed off Schedule 1 list. Congress issue a gas debit card to everyone. Give subsidies to force Ford and GM to build electric vehicles and transition gas stations to charge stations. And thank you for this tip, Troy. I do not fight fascists because I will win. I fight fascists because they are fascists. That's from Chris Hedges. Well said. Well said. All right, guys, I do have an update for you. I know some of you were asking me like about the Ethnic Women's Liberation Panel. That will be back this month, March 20th, Sunday. It's Sunday evening. That'll be a fun episode this time. I know the last two are very serious. This one is going to be about dating. And we're going to try to make you guys laugh. We got some funny stories to tell you. So definitely tune in for that. Guys, of course, you are welcomed as well. You might get a kick out of these stories also. So they'll be back. In fact, I'll go ahead and share for those of you who don't know. Oh, it used to be up here. I don't know what I did with it. I have to find it again. But the women who are coming on to that panel, they're all awesome, of course. I'll show you the thumbnail. Doobie-doobie-doo. Wow, I've done a lot of videos since then. Geez, where is it? Okay, here we go. Yeah. Ethnic Women's Liberation Panel. I'll just share my screen so you can see it. I see that hash rebel. He said the women are coming. He's like, the women are coming. Sorry, this is how I have to share it. But the Ethnic Women's Liberation Panel, I'll zoom in so you can see. Oh, I don't know what happened now. Now it disappeared. I should zoom back out. Oh, there it is. Right here in the middle. Ethnic Women's Liberation Panel, Josana, Delilah, Courtney Banks, Zeneb, Kim Brown, Afeni, Keisha Banks, me, of course. And I'm not sure if Margaret will be there or not. I know she's very busy. But yeah, it'll be about dating. That should be fun. Like I said, just come with your popcorn and all that fun stuff. What was that, John? John said, Sabby, let electoral politics go. Let's encourage everyone to get involved and support mutual aid. Yeah, I do that all the time. I do that all the time. But I also still report on it because people need to know what's happening with our U.S. government. Hash Rebel said we need a drunk women's panel summit. Hey, I give no promises, but who knows? What happens, happens. But that should be fine. I want to tell you guys something. When I came into this space, I always said that I definitely wanted to do some type of a women's panel, like an ongoing panel. I've always been one of those people that I really would like to see women come together. And I'm glad that I found like a group that cares about those issues as well. And I will say, sometimes people ask me this question, Sabby, why do you hang out with guys a lot? And the reality is, like, I do hang out with guys a lot. I prefer to hang out with guys. I've tried to change that throughout my life. Like, I've tried everything. I've joined like women's groups, women's clubs, and things like that. And what I found along the way is that a lot of the women don't really want to support and uplift each other. I would join like these women groups, and sometimes like it's like if you got something that the other one didn't get, they didn't want to acknowledge your success. They didn't want to lift you up or encourage you because that took something away from them. And I really want to say that I wish as women we would stop doing that. Like, really, for me, the only time I'm competitive is with sports. So when it comes to sports, we right here. Yes, this is a competition. But when it comes to women coming together and women encouraging and being a support group and lifting each other up, there's no competition with me for that. Something that's been on my mind recently, because I have noticed that there are some, for them, it is a competition. I feel sorry for them. I really do. But I told myself that even though I tend to be a guy's girl and hang out with the dudes, and just keep it real, that I would never shun, shut out, ignore another woman in this space. And there are some that do. Sometimes it's because of competition. Sometimes it's because they want to be the only one. Sometimes it's because they don't want their audience to hear someone who's given a different talking point. Sometimes it's because they want all of the action for themselves. And so what they will do is they will shun those women, they will block them, but they'll have no problem uplifting the men. And this is coming from a place of heart right now. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'm talking about it. For the women in this space that do that, you know who you are. And if you think that I don't realize what you're doing, you got the wrong one. I was not born like yesterday. I have just as much education as some of you. And the blocking and the shaming and ignoring a woman that is on a network with predominantly men, but you're not ignoring the men, I want you to know I see you, and I see you for what you really are. I am not one of those people. I don't care if someone has more success than me. I don't care if another woman is starting to grow subscribers, is starting to gain views. I don't care. That's good. I would applaud them when that happens. But for those of you who won't and choose to ignore and only want to reach out when you need something from me, I am not that one. Now, I could say your names on here, but I don't want to start an uproar, but I think you know who you are. And I think those of you watching, if you pay close attention, I think you know who they are too. So I have to look out for myself and for the people who actually do want to collaborate and communicate and support each other and work together, and not try to be in a community, in a space with other women who are just a part of a mean girls club and want all this clout. I don't have time for it. And that is why I usually hang out with guys, because every single woman space that I have been in, this has been an issue. I don't know why we can't just come together and support each other and lift each other up. We got to tear each other down. We got to block each other. We got to slam doors in people's faces. But then you have no problem opening those doors for men. I see you and I know who you are. That's my time. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.